Hi, it's Friday the 28th of November 2025, and welcome to this week's My Thoughts vlog. As usual, unscripted and just my thoughts, as it says in the title. This week, I did something interesting because I had a conversation with Alan and Steve, who were also fighting for their dad's medical records and fighting to get at the truth. And I thought, it's been a while since I've heard anything about my request. So I flipped through my correspondence and my emails, and I was amazed. I haven't heard a thing since April. That was the last time I heard from them. That's too long. I think normally I wouldn't have let it lie that long, but I think with the house move and one thing and another, and a few things going on in London, I think yeah, it's just time's just slipped by. So anyway, I sent a rather frustrated email back to them, basically saying, "What's happening? You've had all the documents. I've jumped through all your hoops. It's time to release the records. Use the discretion if you need to." And I also copied in um, John Healy's private secretary, because John Healy did promise that he would step in and help. So I'm kind of calling that favour in now, because it has been 4 years since I started this process of trying to get Dad's medical records, and I am literally no further on now than I was 4 years ago. Nothing. Anyway, so that got me thinking again about they're dragging their heels on that, and we haven't had a date for meeting either John Healy again, the defence secretary. We haven't had a date for meeting the new veterans minister, but most importantly, we haven't had a date for meeting Kia yet. And that was something that was promised to us, and everybody saw it on the BBC. So no date. So why are they dragging their heels? Why are they basically ignoring us? And then it got me to thinking about some of the other campaign groups. I think mainly things like Hillsborough, Grenfell, Infected Blood, Post Office. What they are kind of being dealt with. I know Grenfell's still got a long way to go, and technically they all have. But our progress has just come to a halt. And then it got me thinking about a few differences, really. I know with us, there's kind of an amount of people affected that's still growing. Whereas you look at some of the other injustices that have been single incidents, the amount of victims or affected people is kind of doesn't change that much. Whereas every time we have a descendant born, they're potentially at risk, or every time a descendant develops a health condition, which can happen at any time in life, that number increases. So we are an unknown number of, I don't like to use the word victims, I really don't, of people that are affected. And that, I suppose, we represent an unknown financial liability to the Treasury, and that's something they probably don't want. That's probably something they're trying to get their head around, and something that would make them want to push back on us quite hard, because they don't want an open-ended liability, and so they've got to come up with a way of capping that, which we have sort of offered them with the one-year tribunal. Another thing I thought of was that it's the reputational angle, isn't it? What's caused our issue strikes at the heart of government. It's the Ministry of Defence. It's not the NHS as in Infected Blood. It's not South Yorkshire Police as in Hillsborough. It's not the people who did the cladding at Grenfell and the councils that authorised that to be used. Ours is basically the government and the Ministry of Defence. So their reputation is under question here, and that again is a reason to push back and stall us. And all these other incidents, you kind of think, well, Nobody set out to create the consequences that happened with things like infected blood, Hillsborough, and a lot of the other incidents. Nobody, the end result, the consequences weren't the original intention, of course, except things like the Manchester Union bombing. But that's one person did that. I'm talking about the institutions of state. But with us, it was very different. Ours wasn't an accident or a disaster. Ours was choices made by the British government. Choices such as to test the bombs in the first place. Choices such as, and we have documentary evidence for all of this, that we wanted to test the weapons on stores, equipment, and men, both protected and unprotected. That was a choice, and that was a choice they made. The choice not to have consent, the choice to use men, British servicemen, the choice that they would do it even though they knew there was a risk to their health. That was a choice. We've got the documentary evidence that they saw it as unfortunate, but it was a calculated risk because the number of men affected and the genetic damage that would carry down their descendant line was not enough, or there wasn't enough men affected to threaten the human species. That is how big they thought about this. That is, they were thinking on a species level here. They were well aware of the consequences, but it was a choice they made. It wasn't an accident, wasn't an unfortunate side effect. These were choices. And I think that's what is so disgraceful about it all, because they're not holding their hands up and saying, yeah, these were bad choices we made, and we are very, very sorry. This will never happen again. What they're doing is just saying, we don't want to deal with this. We're just going to push it and push it and push it until it's so far in the distance that the veterans are no longer with us, or that people forget. But we won't. We absolutely won't. So I think, yeah, we need dealing with, regardless of how painful or unpalatable it is for the government. They need to get this sorted because it isn't going away. I'm not going away. Alan and Steve are still going to keep fighting for their dad's records along with me. And, that's just 3 of us. There's many, many more, thousands of us. So, government, if you're listening, and I hope you are, you need to sort this. You need to sort it fast. You need to get that date in the diary to meet us. Because I can sit here and say all this, and you can say you didn't see it. But I want to get in front of your face and say it, because you can't deny that. So please, do the right thing. And it is the right thing, and you know it. Meet us. Talk to us. That's all we want. Yeah. Not a very cheery one this week, I'm afraid. I'm sorry about that. But it needed saying. It really did. Anyway, weather's miserable outside, but it's nearly the weekend, so whatever you're doing, have a great weekend, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.